Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Pyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padambujanmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. So happy to be back after 3 weeks. My COVID thing was okay, not too bad, but I always get complications after any virus, so those are still continuing, but I think I can talk. So if you recall, we are doing Ananda Mimamsa. We are doing Mimamsa. Mimamsa means an analysis of the reality and the lack thereof of our sense of joy. And so, there is a very famous example in the Shastras which says that if you have a defect in the eye, then the moon looks to be two of them. There's a duality in the moon. And so there is some kind of a defect in the eye. I'm not sure which one they're referring to, but it's a very common apparently where if you don't correct the defect, a single moon looks like there is a dual moon. And so just because of your perception and your conclusion that there are two moons, there's not two moons, there's only one moon. And what you need to do is to correct your vision, and so the duality of the moon will disappear when you correct your vision. So this is the example given. Very similar to that is the case in our life, that because of certain defects in our thinking, which are very predictable, it's not a shock to anyone. Shastra knows this. This is exactly the very moment that you and I are born means that we have a defect in our thinking. And due to the defect of our thinking, we perceive the world to be a duality, not a Advaitha. We look at it as Advaitha. And so even though it appears to be a duality, like appears to be two moons, it doesn't mean that there really is a duality. The duality is just due to the fact that we don't have the purity of the mind necessary for us to see that what appears to be two is really only one. This is the example given. So here it requires a certain Mimamsa, some analysis. This is part of the Antakarana Shuddhi. And more than that, it is not just an analysis. After doing the analysis, you have to really put the analysis to practice. And I must say this, I think I mentioned that in my email. this COVID illness that I had for at least a solid 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, was really very fortunate for me. Because I'm beginning to feel, really not beginning, I've been feeling this for a long time, that Ishvara doesn't do anything without any purpose. It is, if you are feeling sick, it is required for some goodness for you. And so what I did was, because I was isolated, I didn't even have time to get out of the room. My wife would bring food and so on and so forth, as you know. So I was completely isolated. There's no television. So what I did was I immersed into a study of certain books that I have been carrying with me for a long time but never had a chance to study. And these are books by Swami Akhandananda ji, Swami Akhandananda Saraswati. And he wrote most of these books in the 1980s, when he was like, I think he must have been 60 or 70. I'm not sure. I have to look up his ages. He, of course, took Mahasamadhi, earlier. So I'm not sure when, but he's no longer there now. But he wrote a bulk of his books in the same time frame when I had gone to the ashram with Swami Dayanand ji. So it's the same time frame. I was very fortunate that in the late 80s, maybe even 90s, when I met Swami Pratyekbodhananda ji, who, as you know, passed away 2 years ago at the anniversary, ashram anniversary. And Swami Pratyekbodhananda had come here also a couple of times. And so I got to know him. And due to his magnanimous nature, he had a whole bulk of books by Swami Akhandananda ji. So he was a big follower of Swami Akhandananda. He really was, he really traveled with him, and he was a great believer in him. And so when I first met him, he asked me, "Have you heard of Swami Akhandananda?" And I said, "No, I have never heard of him." So he says, "I guess what? Guess what? I brought this bulk of books to be given to another student, and he asked me, 'You are Hindi speaking, are you not?' I said, 'Yes.' He said, 'I tell you what, these books are yours.' I said, 'Swamiji, no, you must have brought it up for some money. Please give it to them. I don't know if I can have time to read it or anything.' He says, 'Read it. Just take it.' So this must have been in the early 90s or so. So I have been, and I read a few of them, and this is what happens. If you are not ready, the books don't talk to you. You can just read it, text and so on, but nothing deep happens. Well, guess what? These books, I had it on a separate shelf, Swami Akhandananda's, and I must have, I don't know, I think about maybe 20, 25 books. So I said, you know what? I've never really looked into that. Let me just look into it. So I took the whole thing in the room that I was lying down, and I started reading the books. And I tell you, this is God-given. Because if you read just one book once in a while for an hour in the morning, and then you put it down, it doesn't really have the same effect. I had a bunch of time, and the more I read the books, I said, my God, what a vision, what a way of explaining the vision. I got completely immersed in it. And I think I've now completed 6 or 7 books. I'm in the middle of another one. I'm continuing it, even though I have recovered. There's more books that I am smitten by it. It's the same level with a different style as Swami Maheshananji. And so he has really given a way of explaining things that are more than just Shravanam and Mananam. And in a way you can say, this is one of the conclusions that I came up with, that what Vedanta calls Mananam, which we have been talking about, these Mahatmas, and so he and the people that he was following were really just completely away from the world, living in a very simple life with one meal a day and with just bhiksha and no teaching, but their wisdom was just amazing. So he gives the life of such people what needs to be done. And so we'll talk a lot more about it, and perhaps I think after the Pancadasi is reasonably complete, I'm going to probably do it not going through every verse or something like that, but complete the 5 chapters. I will now devote it to the study of the books by Swami Akhandanandaji. And just amazing. So what we call as Mananam, from his standpoint it is bhakti. It is one and the same thing. And the bhakti just means an attitude towards God which says, why am I not seeing this? What's going on? Why can't you make me see this? I really want to understand. I'm tired of just reading books and so on. I got to really get to it. Can you please help me? This is the bhakti that he talks about, and the steps that you have to take to arrive at that point. Remarkable. Just absolutely marvelous. A new light to the whole thing all over. And not violating any of the things that Vedanta talks about, but throwing a completely different light onto the same thing. In a methodology, in language, in the prakriya and so on, which is slightly different from Vedanta. This God really was kind enough. And of course, I probably would not have appreciated it 25 years ago. But now it grabbed me. And I will be very happy to incorporate many of the things as part of these teachings, and possibly just do a full-time class on that whenever I find time. I will finish this because I've started this. But I think I'm ready to do some of that. Anyway, so this is what the I went through the called Ananda Mimamsa. So Mimamsa means that you have to correct certain vision in your mind so that you are able to see the Advaitha despite the Dvaita. Despite duality, you have to see the non-duality. And certainly the Mimamsa helps you, and then a lot of the bhakti will enhance that capability, as we will see later. Alright, so come back to our main topic of the Pancadasi, 11th chapter. So what we had studied in the last class that we had 3 weeks ago, that we need to understand everything about the source of Ananda. How it happens, how it doesn't happen, why it happens, why it doesn't happen, everything about it from a standpoint of the Vedantic vision. This is what we've been doing. So let's continue with that. Okay, so now there is a section in this which is, and so As you know, I've already communicated this to you. I do not intend to go through this verse by verse. Okay? Instead, what I want to do is to string together conceptual explanations that may ignore a few verses because it goes into certain detail that is not germane to the main concepts. Because these books are written for lots of different audiences, some who are studying, some who are working, some people who are students, some people who are grihasthas, they are householders. And so we can narrow the scope based on what you and I are involved in. So we can actually jump and make sure that we don't lose the continuity of the conceptual explanation. So this is what we're doing. So I will just point out to the main concepts, no matter where it happens, which verses it happens. I won't bother to do that. Some of the time I will mention it, other times I may not. So this is a section, conceptual section, where the Avasta Trailingnam is mentioned. This is an important method of doing Ananda Mimamsa. Avasta Trailingnam. So what does that mean? Lingam, as you know, means a method of inquiry, a hint, a strong hint. You know, it's just like when you're trying to solve a very difficult puzzle, 1,000-piece puzzle, and you're frustrated as to the whole picture doesn't know, these things don't really work together. Then somebody can give you certain hints and say, well, you know what, you're really looking at a tail of a horse. And there are actually two horses. And so now you work on the tail of the horse in this picture. And it gives you a certain hint to overcome your frustration. So that one is called lingam. Lingyate anena iti lingam means by which something is known, by which some hint is known. Remember we went through this very beautiful example that Swami Maheshananji is given, was that somebody had gone to the police in a village and said, my cow has been stolen. It's not there anymore. So the policeman came and he says, really? So policeman said, you know what? We are very lucky because these are rainy days and the cow would have left hoof marks. And so let's follow the hoof marks. And sure enough, they started following the hoof marks and they reached the point where the cow was tied up. This is called lingam, some kind of a hint that allows you to go to that point. So now we are talking about what is called Avasta Trailingnam. So this is an important thing for us to see. So Avasta Traya means the 3 stages in the life of everyone within 24 hours, which is waking, dream, and deep sleep. It's called Avastha. Avastha means a state of beingness. They are totally different from each other, exclusive of each other. Waking stage, dream stage, and deep sleep stage. Okay? Now the dream stage is a lingam for understanding that even though there are things that look very real, they are not. Now this is what we have been studying for a while. So we have studied that more than anything else. And in the Mandukya Karika, which we have done, the 3 different Karikas, this is explained in great detail. Analyzed, this Mimamsa is done in great detail. How, with the help of understanding the dream state, you can understand the non-reality of the waking state. And I consider that is to the main contribution of the dream state. I think I was mentioning it to you that just in the last 10 days or so, I was mentioning it to you if you attended the Saturday morning Gita class. I mentioned the same thing to you, that in the last 10 days or so, when I was feeling better and my COVID I had become negative, but I could not really do my regular exercises. I was not strong enough to do that. I walked a lot in my backyard and nearby and so on. I walked for 45 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes in the evening, quite a bit, about 10,000 steps every day minimum. And while I was doing that, I was feeling bored, so I would put on some headphones and listen to some things. And one of the podcasts I was listening to was I mentioned to you on Saturday, called The Science of Everything. And so it was fascinating. I think I heard about 5 or 6 of them. And one of them was The Science of Sleep. So I said, this is interesting, let me go into that. So this guy, it was a 45-minute section, described the aspects of sleep in a great detail, because it has 4 phases, the deep sleep, the REM 1, REM 2, REM 3, all of those and how it happens. They've measured how often it happens, what is the disposition, do animals also dream, all those kinds of things are done. Then he said at the end, we will discuss the function of dreaming, which he says is purely speculative and we don't know anything about it, but we'll look at some theories. I said, okay, this is interesting. Let me see what this guy says. He said nothing. Basically, he said it's a big mystery. So I was telling you on the Saturday, I really felt like maybe I should write a letter to them saying, have you tried to understand what the oldest spiritual discipline in the world called Vedas, what they say about the function of dreams? Have you ever looked at it? You should look at it. I said, you know what? It's not going to make any difference. These guys have a completely different way of looking at it. But nobody understands it. This is a very personal, very deep, very persuasive, and a very lovingly hint given by Ishvara so that we can gain independence from this false identity that we have in the world. This is the function of the dream. Okay, so enough said. We have already talked a lot about it and so on. Now we come to the function of the deep sleep. They're totally different. And of course the deep sleep has some very obvious utility and very, very valid. And the utility is that it calms you down. It refreshes your engine of the body and mind. It relaxes you. All those kinds of things. In terms of medical truth, valid, completely valid. The real value of deep sleep is to understand the Mimamsa of Ananda. This is what we are going to now briefly look at. This is the function. So, the function of the dream is to look at the non-reality of the waking state with the help of comparisons. Look, even in the dream, it looks very real, but it is not. Similarly, the Jagrata Avastha is also appears to be real, but upon further further analysis, it will turn out to be false. So it is basically false. You may not see it as false, but it is false. That's the function of the dream lingam. In the deep sleep, the lingam is the nature of Ananda. This is what we should study. Okay? So now, we will now look into it. He says, now what we have to see is, in my normal life, what normal? In my life, anybody's life, it is well established conclusion. What's happening? Some sound is coming. I think everything seems to be okay. So in normal life, the conclusion that we have is that our sense of joy is generated by some action. I feel happy when I do something, when I accomplish something, when I complete something. It has some variations. We will discuss it to a certain degree. Like, for example, if you are eating ice cream on a hot day, or if you're drinking some cool drink when you're very thirsty, then you feel joy. So this is a result of certain action based on your sense organs, your organs of actions, and so on. Okay? So that is very well known to us. It is also known to us that some knowledge can give you happiness, as we discussed in the last class also. So if you were expecting some results and if they come out positive, you feel very happy. So the source of joy can also be some knowledge. It can be either work, kriya, karma, or it can be jnanam. Both of them are possible. In both cases, however, we know that the joy doesn't last very long. It has, and we know it very well, that this is, you feel happy for a while. After that, then it becomes normal. You're not overjoyed. You are okay, but the moment of elation is now short-lived and it's gone. So, but anyway, the point is that our thinking is that joy is a result of certain action on my part, and including knowledge. This is a conclusion. Deep sleep violates this conclusion. And in violating this conclusion, it should give us an amazing amount of hints on the nature of Ananda. This is exactly what happens in our life, is that there are enough hints given to us to travel through the right path, but we ignore it. As we were discussing in the last class, we ignore it. We are not sensitive enough to it. Hints are given. So, this is a hint, which is a very important hint that we must grab onto, which is the conclusion that I must do something in order to be happy is not valid. So here's what happens. This goes into considerable detail in the Pancadasi. So I'm collapsing a number of verses as part of this. So what happens is that from our experience we know that sleep is joyful. We all know this. Okay? Given that, and it can be, you can prove it in various ways, but it's also our own experience that is joyful. Because you never go and do something until you know that this is going to yield the right result. Even our eating food, we know that if I'm hungry, then eating food helps me to get rid of hunger. If I didn't know that, I wouldn't eat. But I know it. So similarly, I sleep because I know that it's going to give me joy. Okay, so that being the case, what happens is that I prepare to go to sleep well. I prepare well to go to sleep. So this includes, most important thing is to get into loose clothes. So if you're having a belt, tight belt, which which keep your stomach in and so on and so forth, so that you don't feel like its stomach is hanging or anything. You keep some clothes that are tight fitting. At night time, it can create a problem for you to go to sleep. So you put into pajamas that are loose fitting. And there's no kinks or anything like that. You flop off the pillow. You make the bed very smooth. All these are actions that you take with the help of your mind, with your buddhi. Why? Because the buddhi knows that I am entering into a phase which is very pleasant, and I better be prepared. So you cannot just go to sleep with your shoes on and belt and all of those kinds of things. You can't, that won't be, you may fall asleep certainly, but you will not consciously do that. So consciously you have some kind of an action that you do to prepare. So follow this carefully. You do some actions, like in the case of eating ice cream and so on. Those are actions for happiness. So here there are some actions involved to prepare for happiness, but they are only from the standpoint of anticipation of this period when there is no action. This is an important thing, because in deep sleep there is no action. Even though the preparatory step involved action, some minor action, changing clothes, fluffing up the pillow, adjusting the temperature, all those kinds of things, smoothing up the bed. Yeah, minor actions. But you know very well that you are entering a state of happiness in which there is no need for an action. This is an important thing for us to see. So we should give up the feeling, or we should give up, but we normally don't. We should give up the fact that I should always have to do something for my happiness. That's not necessary. And the deep sleep proves it. So, in fact, if you do something for happiness, then it is limited happiness. Limited happiness means that there are actually, there is a seeker of happiness. There is a thing that you acquire for happiness, and there is a happening of happiness which has a time period which is very short. So this is what is called Triputi. Three ways. So you have an experiencer, experienced, and experiencing. And so that characterizes all actions. That is not true in deep sleep. In the deep sleep, you are not an experiencer. In fact, you disappear. You means the sleeper, the me as the person disappears. So the I thought is not there. In fact, there is a very big hint. I find joy when my sense of I nature is gone. So this we have to remember. This is a very funny situation. That the I thought, the ahankara, the me, is an impediment for unqualified, unconditional happiness. These are the hints given by Ishvara. Now we should take that seriously and see the implications. Is that possible? So that requires a certain Mimamsa, but at least the purpose of the deep sleep is to incentivize for you to start thinking that the nature of Ananda is not what I think it is. And so this is what is called the Ananda associated with Advaitha, non-duality. So Dvaita means Triputi. Means there is a attempter, attempted, and attempting. There is a difference. But in deep sleep there is no attempting, there is no attempted, and there is no attemption. Not attention, but anyway, so the very process of attempting is not there. Is that so? And we love it. We love it. It looks just very strange, but we love it. Why? Because we will go, and Swami Dayananda used to say that. He says, if you withhold, in fact this is a punishment given to many people when we caught hold of certain Afghanistan people after the incident in 9/11, then their sleep was deprived to them. They would not be allowed to sleep, and you go mad. Sleep is very important. And so we love it. Everybody. And yet, how we love it, how the status is not kept in our mind. We do not learn from the strong hints given by Ishvara. And so then we say that really speaking, the Ananda in deep sleep is not generated. In fact, you can say period. It's not generated as it is in action-oriented Ananda in your life. It has to be generated. But the Ananda in deep sleep is not generated. If it is not generated, then what do you mean by it? How can it be there? So we can now say that really the Ananda of deep sleep is our own nature. Our own nature? How can that be? How can my nature be Ananda? If that's the case, then when I wake up, then it should also be Ananda. I should have an experience of Ananda. That's not the case. And if my nature is Ananda, then why am I seeking Ananda? So the short answer to that is that it is not an experience like you are used to. You are used to having an experience of Ananda, which means you are at a stage where you are seeking happiness. This is called conditional happiness. So this is, you become an experiencer, and the status of experiencing means that for most of the time you don't have Ananda. If the conditions all fall into place, then you enjoy Ananda. So this is my point of view of how I approach it. Whereas the Ananda as a nature is not an experience. It is not in the experience in the sense that I look upon as experience. It is the very nature of the experience. Really? Nature of experience? Then how come I don't feel Sukham? So that has to be analyzed. We have to look at it. Okay? So now we say, you have two factors that don't allow you to maintain your happiness when you come out of sleep. I had something I wanted to show you. Okay, anyway, that will come later on. Okay. So now there is a discussion between the questionnaire and so on. And the questionnaire says, okay, I can see that the sleep removes my sense of dukkha, my sense of my sorrow. I can see that. Like for example, in our experience we know that supposing you are sick, you're not well, and it can be a number of things that you're not well. Either you are running a fever, you have a virus, or that you fell down and broke a bone and it's very painful. Number of things can be there. Or you can have certain tragedies in your life where a loved one was badly hurt, or you may have lost the life of a loved one, whatever. So the dukkha from it is just incredible. But when you go to sleep, everything is removed. Your loss of the loved one is removed. If you've broken a bone, the pain is gone, and if you have a cold or a virus or something, you don't feel it. Amazing. Just amazing. So the questioner here says, okay, I can see a person who is afflicted looking forward to sleep because it removes the affliction. But I don't see where you have a positive joy. You have a lack of negative problems, but not a positive joy, to which we say, that's not true. It's not true. Because it's not just the very afflicted that want to enjoy sleep. Even if you are well and you don't really have any affliction that is bothering you, you also want sleep. So it's very obvious that compared to the normal state of our life, sleep is better. It's a very positive feeling, not a negative feeling. Okay? Next we talk about the process through which we have the experience of joy in our deep sleep. Okay, so that's the next point that we are. This is an interesting and an important point. So you remember we talked about the preparation for sleep, where there was some action involved in anticipation of the joy of sleeping. Remember we talked about that? So at that time, your thoughts were externally based. In Sanskrit it is called Bahirmukham. Bahirmukham means that you're looking outwards during this period when you're preparing to go to sleep. And then when you are asleep, this outer orientation disappears and you become in fact internally focused without realizing it. So in the deep sleep there is one thing which is still there, which is that even though you are joyful, you don't know how you are joyful. So there is a sense of not only Advaitha, but there is also a lack of understanding, and so the lack of knowledge or ignorance is engulfing you. So that is there. But in any case, your mind is no longer outward bound. It actually disappears altogether. You cannot even say that the mind is inward bound. It just disappears. So the lack of externality allows you to be joyful. Okay, so this is the process. The same process occurs. This is the thing that we need to think. The same thing happens when you have a joy based on action. Now let's follow through the process. Suppose you suddenly have a desire to eat ice cream. It usually happens that you're just walking around a mall, and especially if it is a very hot day, okay, and you find that there is these kids and others are milling around in a queue for ice cream, all of a sudden you feel like you ask your friend or your spouse, shouldn't we have ice cream? We haven't had ice cream for a while. They said, yeah, let's have ice cream. So now there is a desire for eating ice cream. I remember in Hawaii, we've been to Hawaii so many times for the last 30, 40 years. And there used to be an ice cream shop called Leopard's. And the last few times we have gone there, either they have completely disappeared or they have sold it to someone else. So you don't see them very much. So this was in Maui, in Lahaina. You will find quite a few Leopard's ice cream shops, and they were even better than the normal, run-of-the-mill ice cream. They're very nice ice cream. And so whenever we would go to Lahaina on a hot day, we will say, let's have the Leopard's ice cream. And then you start looking for where the Leopard's is. Oh, so I think it's next block, let's go there. And so you stand in line, there's people sitting there and so on. And so all this time you have a desire for eating ice cream. Okay? Then you actually get it. You get your favorite ice cream. Mine used to be coffee. Coffee ice cream was my favorite. Now I'm diabetic, so I don't eat much sugar kind of things. I might just take a couple of spoons from someone. But so now you start eating ice cream and you have total joy for a while. You're slurping it and so on. And you are just in heaven for 5 minutes while you're eating ice cream. So now let us look at how the joy occurs. Okay? Because it is the same phenomena as preparing to go to sleep. Really? How? How can you say that it's the same phenomena? Let's look at it. And this is all given in Pancadasi, in certain, I forget, maybe 46, I believe. No. Even some other, I forget I have not kept track of the verses. I have in some cases, but not in all cases. So it's very similar to the process of going to sleep. How? Here's what happens. When you have a desire for eating ice cream, your mind is externalized. How is it externalized? Because just like in the case of preparing for sleep, you are looking for clothing which is good, looking for pillows which is good, all external. Pillows, clothing, blanket, bed, temperature, fan, all those kinds of things are externalized. Okay? Similarly, when you are eating, you are looking for Leopard's ice cream, you're looking for externally oriented things. Where is the shop? How long big is the line? What kind of ice creams do they have today? Is my favorite one still available? All those kinds of things, external, your mind is. And you have a certain desire. So this is what's called your own kalpana. Your own kamana rather, not kalpana, but kamana. You have a kamana means that you have a certain desire which blocks your thinking that I must have this, otherwise I'm not going to be happy. Once the desire for ice cream comes about, then you are now totally focused on it. And you're not a happy camper if you don't get it. If you do get it, what happens is your mind turns inwards. When the mind turns inwards, it comes into contact with what is called Chit-Chaya. Chit-Chaya. And so this is, we studied this in Drigdrishya Viveka in verse number 6. Chit-Chaya aveshaut buddhau. Something like that. What it means is the reflection of your own Ananda. Chit means Chit Sukham. Your own consciousness, which is nothing but the nature of Ananda. The reflection of that falls upon the inward looking mind, because the mind has now been released from externality. Because when you're eating ice cream, you're no longer looking for leopard's ice cream, you have it. So the externality is gone, and the natural state of your mind reflects the Ananda of your own self. This is how joy is generated in our life. But in our ignorance, we think that the ice cream has joy. Where in fact what ice cream does is simply remove the externality of your sense organs. And there is also an element where the sense organs have likes and dislikes. So Ishvara has given it in such a way that something which is sweet is our sense organs are very fond of it. Something which is cold and something which is both sweet and cold, which is ice cream, is even better. So the sense organs also are happy. They are not externally based. Your mind is also happy. The desires have been taken away. And so the release of that allows your mind to be united with what is called Chit-Chaya, which is your own reflection of your own Ananda. And the mind assumes the shape of the reflection of Ananda. This is how it gets. So the result of all this analysis is that, really speaking, the source of all Ananda is yourself alone. It is not external. This is proven by the fact that when you are no longer externalizing your thinking in deep sleep, you are joyful. And it is proven even in what is called Vishayananda. Vishayananda means the joy based on experiences of objects, because all it does is to remove the externality of your thinking so that your joy becomes obvious. So this also answers another question that a doubter may have. Because remember, we were talking about that the joy of life, which is based on Advaitha, because any kind of a desire for objects, for knowledge and so on has Advaitha in it, the Triputi that we talked about, right? And so the questioner says, okay, I can understand that the joy resulting from Advaita is short-lived. It is not predictable. All those defects are there, I can understand it. But so is the joy for Advaitha. You guys keep on talking about Advaitha, 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 but I don't see any joy in that as well. Where is the proof that there is joy in the Advaitha? So we say the joy of Advaita doesn't need to be proven. You see that? Because the joy of Dvaita means some conditions have to be fulfilled, and we all know it, that unless I fulfill these conditions in my life, I'm not going to be happy. We all know that. We don't like it, but we are used to it by now. But how can I be joyful by myself? Because that's not my experience. This is the reason I'm seeking joy from outside. So where is that joy? Where is the proof for it? So it is said, listen, this is something unique. It's unique because this is the only thing that does not require anything other than removal of ignorance, that you are joyful. Okay, so let's suspend that for a minute and let's go into another aspect of it. You remember we talked about the fact that as soon as you have a desire for ice cream, now you become unhappy until you get it. And when you do get it, you become extremely happy. You had such unhappiness because of the desire. Because you don't want to really do anything else. You are now, I remember Swami Chinmayananda used to talk about the same thing with coffee. Swami Chinmayananda used to say that, once you get used to having coffee in the morning, you just want coffee, nothing else. Your whole day is spoiled unless you have coffee. I still recall his examples. They're the same thing, ice cream or coffee. Once you have an intense desire, then it doesn't make you happy until you satisfy that desire. Then you become happy. So now the questioner raises a very interesting question. He says, wait, I can see that as soon as the desire for ice cream took hold of you, you became unhappy. And then you satisfied the desire and you became happy. I can see that. But what about the situation before you had the desire for coffee or for ice cream? You were just normally, you're not doing anything, you don't have any desire. Much of the time we don't really have any strong desires, we're just going around it. But you're not happy. Beautiful point. See? So it says, I can understand that when a desire comes, then the desire to end the desire, so to speak, will give you happiness. And so if you didn't have the desire to begin with, then you should be happy. If you think this is your nature, then why aren't you happy even if you don't have a desire? This is his question. Very good question. So we say to that, there are two reasons for it. Two reasons for it. Okay? One is, you do not know that your own nature is joy. When did I not know? I should know this. No. This is part of the ignorance of life. The moment you are born, you are covered with the ignorance. You are only looking for joy outside. You don't know that your own nature is joy. And somebody has to convince you of that. And that's not easy to convince you. First of all, this understanding is not there all over the place. Only Vedas have it. And so it is not easy to obtain. And once you listen to it also, it takes a while. And so the Vedanta has to give you an introduction that listen, it is your own self, and you will understand it. The second thing is that in my waking state, and therefore in my dream state, because the dream state is simply but a derivative of the waking state, it is not true to say that before you had the strong desire for ice cream, there were no desires. It's not correct to say that. Why not? Because the very status of waking and dreaming is full of jumbled desires. Jumbled desires. Jumbled desires means they're all floating in there somewhere, either visible or invisible, all mixed up. So if you just got hold of someone and say, how are you? How are you? Tell me about yourself. First of all, nobody ever does that, you know. That doesn't happen at all. I'm just giving you a theoretical. No one comes to you and he says, how are you? And then you start saying, oh my gosh, this person, really? He's interested in me? So you say, you really want to know how I am? You say, yeah, I know how you are. But what happens is, there's no sincerity in it. I'm just telling you. No sincerity, because the moment you start telling about yourself, after a while they start looking at their cell phones. Is there any message? They're listening to you. Yeah, that's all. Nobody listens to anyone. It's such a fascinating thing, really. You look at the conversation between two people, generally speaking. They're always trying to say, okay, as soon as this point is done, then I'm going to talk. Nobody listens. Maybe your mom and your dad, that also they've got their own issues. They want to tell you about how they're having a problem. I just went to a close relative and he was saying, oh, I understand you had COVID. And how are you? So I said, oh, that's good. Somebody's asking about. So I started to give them how I am. I said, you know, I was positive for certain things, and then I had fever. And while I was in the middle of it, they said, you know, I had the same thing. And then she decided to give me a 10-minute introduction to how she was when she had COVID. Forgot about me completely. This is what life is. This is how it is. So really speaking, you ask somebody, how are you? Supposing sincerely somebody says, okay, how are you? Tell me. What are you going to say? You're going to say, well, I'm okay. I've got some things I'm happy about, some things I'm not. Why aren't you happy completely? Well, you know, I've got some physical problems, I've got this, that, and then my mortgage rates have gone up and my house payments, you know, was variable rates, and I don't know how am I going to do this, and money is a problem, health is a... So the whole life is nothing but a jumble of small desires all floating in there, So it is not proper to say that, so this is the reason, this is what I'm saying, that you are not inward focused completely because of two reasons. First of all is you don't know. You don't know how you are. You don't know that the Atma is Satchidananda. You don't know the idea. You are so far with so many lives that you have met, you have so many lives you have taken, there is no analysis of who I am. I am just like I'm just flitting from one role to another. So there is no real understanding of who I am. And even if there was some understanding, I am now covered with this jumble of desires which doesn't stand out like a desire for ice cream, but it's still there. So this is the reason we can say that one is not completely happy, and so in order to counteract it, we have to look at the nature, because the mind also is not listening, but if it is willing to listen and to do Mimamsa, then you begin to see, I see how all this happens, how I am happy without doing anything at the night time, and it is possible. This is what you should inquire. So this analysis, this way of looking at things has to be continued on, and so I will, we are not done with this analysis completely, but I think that we will, you know what we can do, if you just give me a couple more minutes, I'll just pause. So, no, I think that's going to take more time. I think it's going to take more time. So I'm just going to make a quick, I'll make a point as to where, I don't know where my pen is, but I'll make a point that we will stop at this point and continue on with this analysis for next time. Okay? So with that I will end the class. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Oh, do they, Zarina, that they have a few locations in the Bay Area? I didn't know that. Okay, in Sausalito. Good, interesting. Let's see. Jyoti Shekhar, good to see you. You have to give us a blog on all the places you visited. That'll be wonderful. And Panna, weren't you going to Iceland? I thought you were going to be in Iceland. You either haven't left yet or you're back already. I don't, maybe. Wonderful. See you all. So good. Oh, return. Okay, good. Wonderful. All right. If there's no other questions that you have, then we will continue this analysis next time, the next class, hopefully next week. Okay? All right. Thank you.